Okay, we had so much fun with this activity. I saw this display, this very display that an artist created, a wall of eyes. This sent me to wondering, how could I incorporate this into our Common Core goals? Here is what I came up with. We were presently working on figurative language, poetry, and trying to incorporate global pieces into our Common Core standards. So I went to the internet and began searching for poetry that spoke about eyes. I came up with several different titles. I'll scroll through them quickly here. The importance was I wanted several different poems so all of the students would not have the exact same text in which to identify these examples of figurative language. So essentially, after I copied these, I put two different poems in each of the students' folders. When the students opened their folders, they found these instructions inside along with a copy of each of the other poems. So this is a great way to review for EOGs. One of the reasons our students' scores suffer is lack of following directions, perseverance, time management skills. So we did go over this whole group, and then the students, needed to refer back when they came to me and said, which side of the folder do we put this? I said, read the instructions. So they were very engaged, very intrigued by the initial photo that I showed them of the wall of eyes. So they wanted to work through this process. We had 100% time on task, 100% student engagement, 100% dialogue. The dialogue in the classroom was regarding similes, hyperboles, personification. So I kind of tricked the students into reviewing these terms. They had to write those on the left side of the folder. On the right side of the folder, you'll notice here, the students were asked to find find examples of these types of figurative language. Here again, it is seldom that we find an author who incorporates all of them in his or her text. So I wanted the students to have conviction and know there are no illusions in this piece of text in front of me. I know the difference between an illusion and an oxymoron or a metaphor, and I know there are none in this text. Now, you could incorporate the definitions and terms as a warm-up. Maybe have students match those in the folder. The beauty of using this folder is the students can't lose their work. I have digital copies of the directions and the poems. The students needed to practice writing, to practice citing text, to practice searching for examples. So I was very impressed with their work and their time management. This was a 50-minute class period, and we were able to complete it during that time frame. And the final step of this lesson asked the students to choose from a list of titles out of an envelope and then comprise their own poem on the back of the folder. Of course, the subject of the poem would be eyes. Final step, which we saved for the next class period. Again, I want to reiterate, it was about 55 minutes to complete these first two steps, defining the figurative language terms, identifying and citing examples from the texts, and comprising their own poems with the subject being eyes. And they had to incorporate 3 or more of these figurative language examples within their own poems. Again, these were just a few of the examples that I came up with, and truly some of these were song titles. Some of them were just phrases I had heard. It really did not take long to come up with a nice list of 30 different phrases incorporating the word eyes. And this step just adds a little bit of fun to the writing process. They really enjoyed coming up the mystery step of not knowing what the title would be and incorporating this into their original writing. As teachers, we know students typically complain about the rough draft in the writing process. We had no complaints. We had no lost drafts from our first attempt. And overall, I was so pleased with the effort they put into it in their final products. And again, these are just a few of the examples. They also enjoyed the challenge of incorporating onomatopoeia or an illusion. They really enjoyed this. And we know as culturally literate individuals, we're often asked to draw inferences, to interpret visually, mathematically, technologically. So I purchased these wood scraps at the local Home Depot, Lowe's, lumber supply. They're more than happy to give you their scraps. These I just happened to purchase. Again, ask the students to create an image of eyes that reflected the mood of their original poems. We also completed a rough draft. The students were given an index card to sketch out a rough draft of what it would look like. They had the choice of using markers, pastels, chalk, colored pencils to create a visual aid that accompanied the mood and reflected the mood of their poem. And then students publish their writing by typing the poems. And as a remediation piece then, the students went over their own work using this rubric, and before passing their folder to another individual, made sure that they had followed the directions. It's so important that we teach children what it means when we say, have you checked your work? Because their instinctive answer is to please, and they know the correct answer to that question is yes. So let's tell them specifically what we're looking for. What does a good piece of writing include? What are you going to be looking for, ma'am, when you grade my folder? So this rubric helped them understand as they checked over their own work and then as they assessed each other's work. What were we looking for in this task? How did we review best practices? And I mentioned best practices because I think it's so important to include an extension activity. What comes next? This isn't the end of global learning. This isn't the end of figurative language. They're part of everyday life. So how do we extend our learning? So in this instance, we asked the students to go back. You could use the same poems, choose a different folder just to keep it interesting, keep them engaged, keep the material fresh. This time, let's be sure, do the children know what is a stanza? What comprises a stanza in a poem? Does it have to be 4 lines? and then to define these terms that relate to sound device. This could serve as a pre-assessment when you're moving into sound device, depending on your grade level. This could also serve as a formative assessment during your study of figurative language, of poetry, vocabulary terms relating to literature. You could use this activity anywhere throughout the Common Core. Ask the students to look for these examples and copy. And then even still, how could we extend this lesson? Challenge your students with this question. I would hope and assume their next step would be we could write our own examples of consonants. We could write our own examples of alliteration and include visual aids. So I think it's important that if we keep our eyes on tomorrow, keep our lessons fresh, keep our students engaged, we can only see success and excellence in education.